You're listening to the Talent Therapy Podcast. Here, you'll find discussions around recruiting trends and best practices with talent acquisition leaders in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries so that you and your team are informed and up to date in an ever-evolving space. And now, here's your host, Chris Tamburini.
All right, Terry VanEpps. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to have you. You and I have worked together, loosely off and on for the last couple of years, and I've gotten to know you a little bit more. And I'm excited to get to know you even more throughout this conversation. And so it's a pleasure to have you on Talent Therapy. And so, Terry, I'd love to start where I always start, which is how you personally got into the world of recruiting and talent acquisition. I think the audience would love to hear your story.
Yeah, happy to share that. So way back years ago when I first began a career, I actually went to school and I was trained as a travel agent. And so I was a travel agent for a number of years. I liked to travel. I was young. I could travel. There's a lot of fun things and a lot of perks at the time. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I liked it. And I did it worked my way up through management. I did it for just about 10 years. And I started getting a little bit, I realized that it wasn't a long-term career for me. The pay wasn't that great, but I just wasn't into it anymore. And I started to lose my passion for it. And I started to look into other opportunities. And a friend of mine had his family actually owned a recruiting agency, a local one to the area where I lived at the time in Rochester. And they had been, asking, hey, would you want to do this? And I didn't even know what it was, frankly, at the time. And they placed a lot of temp people and some direct hire people. They payrolled a bunch of people. And I didn't really know much about it. So I said, hey, let me just shadow you. Let me see what you do. I don't understand what you do. Help me to understand it. And so I spent a few days over the course of several weeks kind of sitting with them, watching what they were doing, asking questions about it. And long story short, I decided, hey, let me give this a try. And I actually had to take a bit of a pay cut because it was a cross between a base salary and a draw for commission. And I was like, well, you got to do it somewhere. I'm in a spot in my life where I can do this. Sounds exciting to me. Wasn't a lot different from a sales perspective and at the time from what I was doing. Honestly, I was just selling something different. So I really got hooked up with a good mentor at the time who has since passed away way back when. And she showed me the ropes. She showed me a lot about, what to do, what not to do, how to treat clients, and really started getting me along the path of, this isn't a transactional thing. And back then, it really was more transactional for most people. And so the more I learned about it and the more clients I got, I kind of moved into the direct hire mode. I wasn't doing a lot of temp stuff, but I helped out where I needed to. And so I moved into the direct hire mode and started getting some really good clients who gave me a lot of business. And so that's kind of how I got into it. I did that for a couple of years, about 2.5 years. And, as I got better at it, my income increased, but it wasn't really just about that. It was just about, I kind of developed a passion for it as I understood it more. And then that was my first foray into it. And it helped me learn a lot. That was on the agency side. And then one of my clients, actually a big multinational firm, was a client of mine. And I was placing a lot of engineers for them. And they were hiring recruiters at the time. And they said, hey, would you like to interview with us? You're placing people with us engineers, and we'd rather hire you on and not have to pay you a fee, kind of a thing. And I said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So that was how I got from agency into corporate recruiting. And then I kind of advanced from there. So that's how I started.
That's great. So the travel agent thing is interesting. I don't know that I've spoke to anyone else who started off as a travel agent. And just for my, pure curiosity, what were you doing as a travel agent? I mean, I feel like now everything's done online, but were you working at like was it like a triple A type situation where people would come in and you'd plan their trips, or were you like going? I mean, I don't know. You tell me.
That's it.
What was that role about?
That's
Okay.
it. I worked for an agency. I worked for a large national agency at first called Liberty Travel, and they were travel agents. Back then, there wasn't a lot of online presence, so when people had to book airline tickets or any sort of travel, they didn't have any other way to do it. So they came to us, and that's what we did for them. They told us where they wanted to go, if it was just an airline ticket, just a car rental, or if it was a whole package, all inclusive somewhere, in the world. We did it all, and it was really neat, and it was fun actually back then. Now I wouldn't expect that it would be as fun because a lot of
Yeah.
people, including myself, book things online, and I have that knowledge from my travel agent days that have helped me be able to, kind of continue to use what I learned back then to try to, find the best deals and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I haven't honestly met anybody else either that was a travel agent that does recruiting now, but it's interesting. And frankly, most of the people that I know that have got into talent acquisition, they just a lot of them don't start there. They start either salespeople. A lot of people have a psychology background, and it's interesting
Mhm.
to see the diversity of backgrounds of people who actually end up in talent acquisition and are good at it. Most of them don't start there.
Most of them don't. Actually, I don't think anyone does, right?
Right.
It just kind of happens by accident, it seems like. And then, going back to your agency days, were you running what they'd call a full desk, right? So were you doing working with clients and working with candidates? Were you focused on one more than the other? It sounds like you were doing a little bit of both.
I was doing both. I was running a full desk, and as they needed me, because like I said, we did both temporary placements and we payrolled people and we did direct hires. And um, you know, obviously the money was in the direct hires, but I filled in wherever I needed to. I was hungry. I wanted to learn, and if they needed help to fill a project with a bunch of temps within 2 days, I jumped in and I helped out. So I did a little bit of everything, and where I really kind of found my niche was on the direct hire side. It was the relationships that I was forming with corporations that I was reaching out to. So I was picking up the phone, calling companies, seeing what they had posted, whether it be online. Believe it or not, looked in newspapers back then too. And online was just becoming big in the recruiting area. So I was using that, and I was just cold calling, reaching out to companies and saying, hey, you know, I'm not a hard pressure salesperson. And I think people really liked that approach. It was like, hey, I'll try to help you. I'm not here to, infringe on anything from that perspective, but I think I can help you. And if you're struggling with this, let me give it a shot. You don't owe me anything unless I find you somebody. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. And, cold calling, it's tough to do. I didn't love it, but I had to do it in order to sustain myself and make a living. So I did it. And so then, we'd have candidates reach out to us. I'd reach out to candidates through various methods. And literally at times we just went through the phone book and reached out to folks. And back then it was a lot of picking up the phone and making phone calls. So not as much now, but frankly, most of the successful agency recruiters that I know still pick up the phone. So I don't think that a lot of that has gone away. Yeah, we have a lot of tools that help us now, but you can't get away from that kind of personal connection, in my opinion. And I think the more successful recruiters out there are ones that pick up the phone.
That's right. No, it's always this topic of debate. Like, hey, do you need to cold call anymore as a recruiter? My answer is absolutely. Why wouldn't you, right? Not everybody is going to answer their email or their text messages. However, having that said, email and text messaging has made things
Yes.
a lot easier for recruiters. But even now, when I'm recruiting, right, I will utilize email campaigns and text message
Yep.
campaigns, but I always call the candidates if I don't get in touch with them. And believe it or not, people still pick up the phone and they're interested in hearing about opportunities.
Yes, they do.
And
And
so
the way we get information has changed, but the way you reach out to people, that's changed also. But I think, like you said, the combination is what I think makes people successful. It's easier to get information on people than it was back in the day, but it still never takes away from using that one-on-one phone call as a means to reach people in addition to other things.
that's right. It's a multifaceted approach. Um, so, I think one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past, and this is something that I think the audience would love to hear about, is your take on what the difference is between a recruiter and a talent advisor, right? They're obviously related, but there's some substantial differences in what each of these roles do. And maybe a person takes on both of these roles, but they have to put on different hats. So, I'm curious, Terry, to hear how you would differentiate a recruiter versus a talent advisor.
Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing up this topic because I think it's really, really important. And before I start, I'd like to give a shout out. I never started using the term talent advisor until a good friend of mine who hired me in one of my previous roles, D. Vitale, was using it regularly. And I'd heard it. I didn't use it regularly. But once she started using it and she hired me on to be to work under her and lead a team, I started using it more. And when I took my role in my current role, I changed it. I was like, we're not recruiters, we're talent advisors. And so to me, the main difference is recruiters are transactional and talent advisors are consultative. So I think with all the different means, the different ways to fill positions, the ways that we were talking about reaching out to candidates, it's easy to be transactional. It's not as easy or as value added, especially in a corporate environment. This works for the agency environment too, to be a talent advisor and be that consultant. We're consultants. So a talent advisor to me is someone who knows the space. So our job to our hiring managers is to guide them on where these candidates are by using various tools, talent mapping tools and things like that. What do you need? Digging into what is it that you need. Like, you don't want to see anybody from me until I give you what X, Y, and Z. What is that you need from me? And then living up to your promises that you're gonna make. So I think and this still happens, the recruiters that are transactional, they kind of get an idea. They're more about volume and kind of throwing things out there and hoping somebody grabs onto one. And then, and that may work for some people, but I think where you add the most value, especially in a corporate environment, is where you do partner with those hiring managers and make sure that you understand exactly what they're looking for. You tell them what you're doing. You tell them what you're going to do as far as reaching out and finding these candidates. You keep them updated onto what you're doing on a regular basis, so they're not coming back to you and asking you. You revisit if things aren't working. You sit with them and say, hey, here's what we've done so far. Here's some ideas that I think of things we might need to shift gears a little bit, and here's why. So you have that partnership with them, and it's a back and forth relationship that you have, and build that trust with them so that they don't want to, from an external or an internal corporate perspective, that they're not reaching out to this person that they've known for years who is just gonna kind of throw resumes at them. And if they do what we're not doing, then they're going to go external more. And not that external is bad. Obviously, you and I have dealt together, and there's a time and a place for partnering with the right firm. And I think that's another thing that a talent advisor does, is they're not afraid to say, hey, we need some extra help here. And Chris, when you and I have worked together, that's what we've done. But you've been a partner to us, and you aren't somebody that just is trying to make a quick dollar. So talent advisors seek out those partnerships with third-party firms as well, and have a really good core of third-party firms that they know they can trust and turn to. And then that hiring manager knows that the talent advisor will know when to do that. To me, a recruiter is just pushing a bunch of people through the process, not building relationships with hiring managers or candidates. That's another thing we have to do, is build trust with candidates, provide a good candidate experience. Those are all the things that talent advisors do that recruiters, frankly, just don't, in my opinion. So I think it works on both ends. It's working with the hiring manager, partnering with third-party agencies who are great partners, and you only have a few of them. And then also building relationships with strong candidates and following through with them. And even if they're not the one for that job, It's following through and making sure that you close the loop with them. So and that's the big spectrum to me of a talent advisor versus a recruiter.
I love that. I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned are things that are very familiar to me, and I've seen both. And talent advisor is the longer play. It's the more detailed play. It's the deeper play. Recruiting can work, but in a lot of ways, it's like gambling, right? You throw a lot of things out there and you hope something sticks. And hey, sometimes it sticks and it sticks really well, but a lot of times it might not. And I think a big part of that is what is the experience that both the hiring manager and the candidate are having throughout the process.
Yes.
I mean, geez, I was on a call this morning where we've been on this search and the hiring manager needed to switch things up a little bit, and it was substantially different from where we started the
Mm-hmm.
search. And I said, you know what, if we weren't having these regular conversations and meetings, then we'd be lost, right?
Right.
And so it's good to hear that from your end. I have a question for you.
Sure.
um, you know a lot of times in recruiting or in talent advisory, there might be this idea that the hiring manager has a bulk of the pull and the say, but as a talent advisor, there's certain influences that you have that maybe you don't even know you have, or that you forget that you have. But I think being part of a talent advisor is realizing that you do have probably more influence than you realize. And so what I'm getting at, Terry, is when you're working with a hiring manager, how much do you try to influence them to get to a place that's productive, right? So there might be an example where a hiring manager has this idea in mind as to what they want in a hire, right? They want, this pie in the sky and they think they're going to get it. But it maybe takes somebody like you to say, hey, that's great, but that's totally unrealistic. And so I guess, yeah, my question is, when and how do you address those situations? Because we all know they happen, and it takes a talent advisor and a realist to kind of come to terms that that's not going to happen. And it's kind of a fine line, especially on the agency side. It's a fine line to ride. But I'm curious to hear how you have approached those things, because I have to imagine you run into them quite often.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up this topic because actually this is something that I talk with regularly with my team. And we've had some recent examples where we've had to do this too. And by this, I mean, there's a difference between giving your opinion and then using data to
Mm.
to not prove a point, but to guide or influence. So we go back to using data. So you can say, well, I've been poking around out there, and my thoughts are this isn't going to work because of X, Y, and Z, and that's part of it. Or you can say, oh, great, I did this, and this is what my team has been doing. So hey, let's jump on a call with me real quick. Tell me all the parameters that you're looking for. I'm going to show you what I'm doing on a video call. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to use LinkedIn as an example for this. I'm going to show you what I'm doing, and I'm going to show you the results I'm getting, right? And we walk them through it. So with all these keywords, all these things that you say you must have, we need to determine what really is a must have and what are some of the things that you might be a little bit more flexible on. I'm going to try to find you what you want. Absolutely, all those must haves. However, I want to show you what we're working with here. And so it's using that data to say, all right, so you see how many, you're open to a nationwide search, or you're only open to getting people in the Boston area with these skill sets, all of these skill sets. And we got 50 people back. We didn't get hundreds of people. We got 50 people. And the likelihood, the response rate, if you go with an average response rate, is 10%. I might hear back from five of these people, and the likelihood that they're going to want to change, maybe they all will, but that's what we're working with here. So now, if we take away a few of those keywords that you think you can train somebody on, the longer we wait for this perfect person, the longer this position is going to be open. Whereas if we don't expect the perfect person, and I'm not asking you to settle, that's another thing I say to them. I don't want you to settle, but let's be realistic here about what's trainable and what's not. How long is it going to take you to train people in these other skills? Because we might spend that much time where you could have had somebody trained up waiting for the perfect person. And so then what we'll do is we'll peel back the layers a little bit and then say, all right, so if we remove these two keywords, look at how many more options we have. Or if we expand the geography that you're looking at, look how many more options we have. and we go right back to that data, because that's different than an opinion, right? And that
Right.
using data to help influence is extremely important, regardless of if you're an internal corporate recruiter or an external, agency recruiter. Using that data, and if you have tools like Talent Neuron, for example, where they actually have heat maps where you can plug in a job description and they can show you where these people are located around the world, and where the bulk of these people are. Hiring managers are impressed by that. And then you can say, all right, well, let's do some geo-targeting for ads in this city, because this is where the bulk of these people are. We'll see how many people respond. So it's kind of combining all those tools together, and influence, that's the word that you use, and that's exactly what I use. But you got to influence with data. And that's where it seems to be the most, where it's proven to be the most effective for me and my team. And when we do that, we end up filling roles that initially started out tough. They started out really difficult, but when we walk the hiring manager through the process and build that trust with them, then that helps them open their minds a little bit more, because again, we're using data, we're not just giving our opinion. They're the experts, but we need to show them that we're the experts in finding people.
It's interesting. How much in the data approach, right? It's always great, right? Because it's tangible. But take someone like yourself, right? Decades of experience. You've seen a lot. How much do you think you're able to influence them with just your experience and your opinion? You might be able to say, Mr. Hiring Manager, I know that this is going to be a difficult search. I know that this person maybe is going to be impossible to find. I mean, would you take that approach, just taking your own, I don't want to say bravado, but I'll say, you have some, you
Experience.
hold some weight, you have some experience, you hold some weight there. How much of that do you think can influence it? And how much of that do you rely on based on your experience?
Yeah,
Or
it
is it really
does.
just data?
I think you got to use both, honestly. And so data, it doesn't matter if you're new or you've been around for decades. Data is always going to be your friend. Absolutely. However, if
Yeah.
you have been around for a while and you have worked in different industries or the same industry for a while, you absolutely can lean on that. And I think that goes to, hey, in my experience, you can kind of combine the two with data. So you say,
Yeah.
in my experience of filling these roles through the years, this has taken a little bit longer, and here's why. And you kind of set that expectation up front, but you can use that data. Oh, in the past, when we filled these roles, it shows that it took us 120 days on average to fill similar roles like this. So if you set that expectation up front and say, hey, you might think we might fill this role in 3 weeks. I don't know. However, the data shows, and my experience combined with that data has told me anytime I've tried to fill this role in the past, it's taken a little bit longer than that. So I just want to set that expectation up front so that they're not thinking, I want to fill this in 3 weeks. Yeah, I do too, right? However, let's be realistic here. And here's part of the reasons why. So I use my experience and I combine it with the data and say, I just want to set expectations with you here. I'm going to try to fill it sooner, but data shows and my experience tells me when I've done this before, it may take this long. So I use both.
Great. Now, again, multifaceted approaches here are always the best, right?
Yeah, and it's different depending on the hiring manager. It really is. It's different. In some hiring managers, you need to kind of change the way that maybe something doesn't work. Maybe they don't want to hear that. So you got to kind of mix it up a little bit. And maybe some hiring managers rely more on my experience than they do the data, and some hiring managers are the other way. But generally, that combined approach, it proves to be effective. And some people jump right in and, oh, I get it. I appreciate you sharing this data with me. And other people, it takes a little while longer to influence them the way that they need to be influenced. But if you keep going back to that data, show them the pipeline, what you did to kind of build this pipeline and how it's getting smaller and smaller, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. You've been part of multiple organizations and you've entered these organizations as a talent advisor or a head of talent at different stages or different levels of maturity throughout their recruiting process, we'll call it, right? And so you've probably seen things at larger companies that worked well, and you've probably gone to smaller companies and you say, okay, this is broken. We need to fix this. And then there's often situations that exist where you might go into a role and the hiring managers, the hiring teams really don't have confidence in a talent acquisition process or a talent acquisition function based on chaos that's happened in the past, or maybe things that were managed poorly. And so, to be a true talent advisor, I think you need to be able to build a foundation of trust and confidence. And so I'm curious to hear your take on maybe some examples of how you've done that, where you've walked into a situation that was suboptimal and you've worked hard to make it more of an optimal and streamlined situation.
Yeah, and I'll start off my conversation, or my response, I should say, by saying this. In no way at all am I, saying anything bad about any of the
No,
predecessors of any jobs that I've gone in before, that at all. I just want to put that out there. And
sure.
that's not what I'm here to do, and I know that you know that as well. But I just want
No,
to make sure that's
yeah,
clear, because it is what it is, and what happened, what happened. My role at coming in and not looking back is moving forward, and I'll use my current role as an example. I feel that there wasn't a lot of trust, there wasn't a lot of confidence in the internal TA team, and it wasn't necessarily their fault. There were a lot of reasons why. We didn't have technology that enabled us to do our jobs more efficiently. Maybe we had a recruiter or two in place and not a talent advisor. And so the first thing I did was do a really like a road trip, a road tour, if I would, virtually, and went to these leaders in the organization and said, what are we missing? What am I missing? What are you not getting from us? What's going well, but what's not going well? And I needed to understand the pain points first, why they weren't using the internal team as much as they should be, and what we could do differently. And so I did, and I met with every single leader in the company, and I've done this in past roles too, and pulled all the information together, went back to them as a group and said, this is what I'm hearing from you. And I wanted to validate that everything I was hearing was a lot of it was common. A lot of it across the board was similar. We're not, you're not, it seems like we're not, the talent acquisition team isn't listening to me. They're not giving me candidates that aren't qualified for this role. And so it's just easier for me to pick up the phone and go with somebody who I know who's going to give me what I want. And that's what a common theme was. And there's various reasons behind that. I'm not knocking anybody that was in the role
sure.
previously. There were reasons. And so I went back to the senior leaders and I said, this is what I'm hearing. And is this correct? And yes, they would validate, yeah, these are the things that are pain points. And here's some areas where we're doing really well. So let's capitalize on those. And then I came back and I didn't make empty promises. I said, here's my goal. And here's the timeline around our goal. And I met with my team and I said, here's what I'm hearing. And here's what I think we need to do. But the thing is this wasn't about me. This was about my team. I had a good team, and I have a good team, a really good team that I'm proud of. And we had to make some changes internally, but we had to get the right people in the right spots. And so I didn't do this on my own at all. My team was on board. I listened to them. I said, what are your pain points? What do you need from me to do your job better? And how can we be creative so that we can get you what you need to do your job better? Because a lot of it wasn't even their fault. It was they didn't have the tools they needed. So we were very reactive and we were panicky all the time. And it was like, we got to get out of this cycle. And so it was really a lot of listening and then getting feedback from my team on what they needed from me and from the senior leaders and the hiring managers and what they needed, and combining all of that and going back to them and saying, here's what we're going to commit to. I can't fix everything at once, but here's what we're going to commit to. Part of it was we didn't have an ATS in my current role, and that was slowing it way down. And so we worked on that. We launched our ATS in May of this year, and it's been going wonderfully, and it really has improved not only our outreach to candidates, but an exposure to our jobs, but just the way we interact with our hiring managers. But I gave them other tools that they needed, and we standardized processes, because the experience that our hiring managers were getting from one talent advisor to the next was different, because we didn't have standardized processes in place. We had too many different ways of doing things. We didn't have standard intake meetings, to get to the heart of what we needed in the beginning of the process. So we weren't wasting time sending candidates along that didn't meet the qualifications. We weren't necessarily screening people in advance and providing hiring managers with a full slate of candidates. And I'm not saying everybody wasn't, but it wasn't consistent. So we needed to add some consistency and some standardization. And so we made commitments and said, we're going to do this by this date. And here's how it's going to change your experience. And if it's not working, and then I had touch points throughout the process, still do. Is this working for you? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? Is this helping you? What more do you need from us? What's going well? In my current role, I initiated. We're surveying. We're measuring what we're doing. We're using data, as I mentioned before, and we're measuring what we're doing. So every hiring manager gets a survey after their new hire starts about their recruiting process. And so we're learning with data what we're doing well and what we're not doing well and what we can make some tweaks and adjustments to. But every new candidate gets a recruiting survey as well, every new hire. And they tell us what went well for them and what didn't, because candidate experience is extremely important as well. So now we're using this tool to survey both sides to say what went well for you and what didn't. And then we're tweaking what we're doing based on that. So it was really a lot of rebuilding the trust, becoming talent advisors and not recruiters, standardization, making sure our process was the same no matter who our hiring managers dealt with, and using that data to get better, but then delivering and then doing data points and checks throughout the process to say, hey, are we still on the right track? Are we moving in the right direction? And I'm happy to say that my team did this. It wasn't me. It was all of us together. I couldn't have done it without them. And I mean that. It's not a one-man show here. It's a collective effort. But I also had the support from my leaders to allow me to do the things that we needed to do. They gave me the leeway and the leverage to do what I needed to do, and they trusted me. And I think that that's key. And we've built trust back with our hiring managers and our leaders internally because of those things. But we still have some work to do, and we will always have work to do because you never arrive. So I know I'm obviously very passionate about this piece, but I kind of went off on my process there. But we still have some work to do, but I love where we've come. And in my most recent SLT meeting, senior leader meeting, it was great to hear the CEO say, we've changed a lot about how we recruit for the better in a very short period of time. Thank you. And I said, it's not me, it's my team, but thank you guys for giving us a chance. So it's going well, but we've had some bumps in the road. We've had some hiccups, and we don't get everything right all the time, but we're moving in the right direction, and people are seeing it.
I think by the way, thank you for that, because that was really thorough, and I think that's really important for other leaders in TA to hear. But I think what you just disclosed and what you just explained is a textbook example of leadership in TA, right? So it sounds like that, obviously you're giving credit to your team, as you should, and you're giving credit to other individuals in the organization that have allowed you and enabled you to take on that leadership. But without that leadership from you, none of those things really would have happened. And so I think what you're getting at, or one of the things that I heard, is that in order to have trust and confidence amongst the hiring managers, that there needs to be some sort of leadership in TA. Whether you're a one-man show or you have a team, that leadership needs to exist. And that is hard to come by, right? I think there's a lot of really good recruiters out there. There's a lot of good talent advisors. But I think there's a difference between individuals that are good at recruiting and talent advisory versus individuals that are good at that, but also good at being a leader, right? And I think that leadership piece in TA might be the most simple answer to how you build trust with some of those hiring teams and hiring managers. And maybe you don't have to be the best recruiter or the best talent advisor to be the best leader. I mean, chances are you probably are a really good recruiter and talent advisor if you are a leader in that field. But the leadership piece is key. And so, it's really refreshing to hear what you're saying, because that just doesn't apply to recruiting. I think that applies to so many other functions within business, that leadership and that constant seek for feedback and enabling your partners and those that are working on your team to to build things and implement processes and to trust them and delegate to them. Um, that's huge, and that's not always easy to find. I mean, conceptually, it sounds simple, right?
Yeah.
But it's a challenging thing that I think a lot of leaders um, struggle with. Um, self included, right? I've led teams in the past, and the later on in my career, it's always been more successful when you're constantly seeking feedback. You're making sure that you're not leaving any stones unturned. You're soliciting feedback. You are sharing feedback, and that just like you said, it's almost impossible to arrive. But as long as you're constantly on that quest to improve and learn and give credit to others and let others be independent, that's when things seem to really, really become more productive.
Yeah.
So you obviously hit on a topic for me as well, because I've always been really passionate about leadership and the effective ways to build teams. And so what you just described was that, whether it's in recruiting or clinical operations or, molecular biology, there's that leadership piece is huge.
Yeah, and you need to, and I've learned from good leaders and bad leaders in my career, honestly. And I always said to myself, I don't want to be a bad leader. And and
Yeah.
and I've haven't always, I'm not perfect by any means whatsoever, but I think building that trust with your team is especially key. And shout out to Leah, Alyssa, and Lauren, who's my current team. I had to mention them because they're wonderful. But I think you need to own things too. If you need to be have your team's back and not take the blame for things that aren't your fault and stand up in a very tactful, respectful way. But at the same time, if we mess up, we need to raise our hand and say, this is on us and we own it. And here's what we're going to do so it doesn't happen again. And I think that all goes back to building that trust and being a leader, because leaders aren't perfect and leaders aren't always right. Believe me, there's many times when my team has way better ideas than I do. But it's a matter of getting those ideas and then implementing them together that really makes the difference. So we'll never be perfect and we'll never arrive, but we also need to own our mistakes and move forward, learn from them, and move forward.
Isn't it crazy how many good ideas you can find just by asking your peers and your teammates that
Amazing.
you feel you feel that, oh, I should have known that, but you need those people surrounding you to kind of give you different ideas or maybe resurface ideas that you had in the past and you forgot about. And so it's just amazing, just by talking to other people, having simple open conversations, how much you can either refute some of your thoughts or validate some of your thoughts or just get totally new
Yeah,
ideas. And that collaboration just makes for such a more productive, better process.
agree.
Yeah, that always fascinates me. And I'm always like, even when I have conversations with like my wife, right, about things that we're doing with the kids or things we're doing, she'll bring up something and I'll be like, wow, why didn't I think of that?
Exactly.
It seems like such an obvious idea. So it's just good to have other minds
It is.
uh, interacting. Um, applies in life and business.
Agree.
I appreciate your insight on leadership and building trust. So this actually ties in pretty nicely to something else you and I spoke about, which is obviously lately there's been this debate about on-site versus remote work versus hybrid work. And I think, depending on your function, there's probably some different takes on that. But when it comes to recruiting, right, when it comes to being a talent advisor and a leader within talent acquisition and recruiting, being on site with those teams and building those relationships with those hiring managers and meeting with candidates versus doing most of it remotely over the phone. I'm kind of curious to hear your take on that, because that it's been a topic more over the last couple of years than it's ever been, and
Hmm.
it's going to continue to be a topic
Yeah.
in every industry. But we're talking about talent acquisition and recruiting, so I want to hear your take and your opinions and some of maybe your successes and failures when it comes to working remote, working on site, working hybrid.
Yeah, I think it can be done, especially from a talent acquisition standpoint. I think it has to be a mix, quite honestly. So I am a remote employee technically. I live in Buffalo, and the company that I work for is based out of the Boston area. And this is the second company that I've worked for in a row that has been based out of the Boston area, and I was remote. But even though I'm a remote employee, I still find, and maybe this is a little more old school, but I still find a ton of value of getting into the office once every 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever the cadence is, getting in front of my leaders and my team for the ones who are on site there, and being present and building relationships and having coffee face to face and shaking hands and just getting to know people on a personal level. I still think there's a lot of value in that, personally, from a leadership standpoint. And one of my talent advisors lives in the area. And since I've started, she used to be in the office quite often, and she still goes in a couple times a week, but she's learned to balance it a little bit better, and she likes the opportunity to work from home a little bit more. And then I have another talent advisor that's completely remote, lives in Denver, and she's from the Boston area. And comes when she comes back to Boston, we make it a point to have her come into the office, talk to her customers face to face, those who are in the office, and me go there too, so we can all get together and not only do things together from a work standpoint, but maybe go out and get some dinner afterwards. So I think it's doable and it's workable, but I think you need to be consistent in how you treat people, and I think you need to understand where they're at, and try not to pull the rug out from underneath them, and understand why, if there's a big push to get everybody back in the office. Our tactical, at my current company, our tactical, mode of operation is hybrid, and you're at home a couple days a week, and you're in the office a few days a week as well, and that's okay. But I was hired as a remote employee. I don't feel like they're gonna pull the rug out from underneath me. But I think what was important for me to be successful was to be present there. Although we do a lot of things over video, and you can take some steps and do some things and fun things over video chat and things like that help build that camaraderie. And me and my team do that. But I still think there's value to being face to face, even if it's occasionally. I do see that value, and I'm looking at all the articles out there, reading the articles about, so and so company is telling everybody they have to be back. And I get that. I get the reason for that, because I do think there's still a lot of value in that face to face interaction. However, I think we need to be realistic about the cadence at how often people are in the office. And I think you need to be upfront with that with people from the very start, and realize, am I doing this just because I'm more comfortable, requiring people to come into the office all the time, or do I think there's a lot more value in it? And it's being open with why we're doing it. And but I think from a talent acquisition standpoint, frankly, I think the future, even though you see people getting called back into the office, I still think the future is going to be some sort of a balance between that work from home and that on-site presence, whether it's one day a week, 3 days a week in the office, or hey, we only need to get in together, once a month, or whatever it is, whatever your decision is. I still think that that's going to continue to be an issue moving forward. And where I think the teams that are going to be most successful are the ones who balance that the right way and don't go hard and fast in one direction, but understand where everybody's at, and then make a general call. You're never going to please everybody all the time, but make a general call to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and how we're going to do it, because we think this will work best for us. And then you tweak it as you go. You got to learn as you go. But I think there's going to continue to be that element of, sometimes in the office and sometimes not. And whether it's weekly, once a month, once every 2 months, I don't know what that's going to be. It's just going to be whatever that particular organization decides on. But I don't think we're getting away from it.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I mean, I am a big proponent of doing things face to face when you can, right? Yeah. There's just going back to our earlier point where people are with each other, they start spin ideas around. In person, there's a whole other level of just communication that happens, and you can learn a lot more in person than you can over video or phone. Yes. However, you don't need to be in person all of the time. Actually, there's I'm sure there'll be studies done on this, right? But there's probably this like law of diminishing return where you can be so productive in front of your computer and on the phone and over video and save so much time. And then, if you were doing all of that in person, you're going to lose some productivity, right?
Right.
So um, that hybrid approach, I think, in recruiting is the best approach. Now, what that is, I think, is going to differ a little bit for every organization, but
Exactly.
being remote, but also having an in-person component, whether it's with your team or whether it's with the hiring managers or the candidates, I think having that balanced approach is key and the most productive and the most efficient, and I think benefits everybody: candidates, hiring managers, talent advisors. It's the most productive, I think,
I agree.
for TA.
Yep, I agree. I think we're on the same page with that. Each
Yeah,
organization is going to determine what works best for them, but I think they need to be open to understanding people's personal situations, working with it, being fair to everybody, making sure you give everybody the same opportunity. But it's going to be different for every organization, but I think it's got to be some sort of a mix.
going back a little further into our our recruiting histories, when I first started in recruiting, and this may have been the same for you, we had to meet every
Yeah,
candidate. We had to meet every client. We were in the office every
yeah.
day interacting with each other. And that's how I grew up, right? And I'm sure you probably grew up similarly. But when you look back at it, you're like, wow, there's probably a lot of inefficiency in there.
Yes, no, you're right. And I did the same thing too. And that's why I still see the value, though I do. I mean, you can
Totally.
get, I mean, these side conversations you have, you build that trust and camaraderie with people better when you're in person, but it doesn't mean it's impossible to do it when we're not. I've never met you face to face, not yet at least, right? However, the
Right.
more we talk and we get to know each other and we share kind of who we are as people and kind of our experience, we have earned that trust and with each other. And I'm sure it would be even better in person, but we're a perfect example of that, right? So,
Right.
and I'm looking forward to meeting you at some point when in face to face. However, I think from when our relationship started a few years back to now, it's changed quite a bit for the better. And I
Yeah.
think we both, earned each other's trust just through the way that we've been interacting.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect example. Is just you and I, and how I think we've been able to build a relationship totally remotely.
Yeah,
And but there always is that in person extra communication that happens. That's just you can't beat it.
agreed.
So
Yeah.
awesome. All right. So last question for you, Terry, is what advice would you give to anyone who's looking to enter the TA space, or someone who maybe recently entered and is looking to advance their career within talent acquisition?
So I think it's really good to try to align yourself with really strong talent acquisition leaders, whether you work for them or they're in the industry. I mean, you go on LinkedIn or any social media talent acquisition type group, you'll find out quickly who the people that are recognized as leaders are. And it's really, it might be harder to build a relationship with them if you don't work with them or for them, or if you don't, meet them face to face. However, you can always listen to their advice. You don't have to know them personally. There's some great leaders out there that give really great advice, and I think you're going to take what works for you. Take the bits and pieces. Think about the relationships that you're going to build. And honestly, if you're looking to get into the industry or you've just gotten into it, my one piece of advice is don't be that transactional recruiter. It still works for people. You said it earlier, Chris. It still does work for people. I don't think it's sustainable, and I think you can build a much more fruitful and enjoyable career by becoming a consultative talent advisor. Whether you're a corporate talent advisor or a third party firm, it takes a little bit more time, but I think it's more fulfilling. You build longer relationships, you have repeat business, you earn trust with people, and it just works. It just does, in my opinion. So partner with those people who do that. Ask a ton of questions. Any talent acquisition symposiums or conferences you can go to, they usually invite some great speakers to those things. Get exposure there. Get to know as many people as you can and soak in as much as you can. Never think that you're going to know it all, because you won't. Ask a ton of questions, but be that talent advisor and not that transactional recruiter, because I think you'll go a lot farther. You'll earn a lot more respect with people, and you'll build up some really strong relationships by taking that approach.
Yeah, I love that. You couldn't have said any better. I would give probably the same advice to anybody else. And so I think that's a perfect note to end. And Mr. Terry VanEpps, it's been a pleasure to have you. I think you have shared generously some amazing advice and some experiences. And I think anyone who listens to this will appreciate that and hopefully be able to implement that. And it's clear to me that you're a great leader in TA. And so thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. And again, I hope I give back in a little way, even if it's one bit of information that somebody gets from this, that is successful as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Talent Therapy Podcast with Chris Tamburini. This show is for entertainment purposes only and is copywritten by Rana and Vance, LLC.